but I do feel a sense of pride in having been a part of probably the biggest amphibious and air assault that'll ever take place. I can't conceive of another operation that vast taking place with the new weapons and the new technology that they have. I think we saw the biggest one that'll ever be, and we're part of it. I think so. You know, for the life of me, I can't remember the weather we had, except that it was not stormy, and I don't remember rain, but somehow it wasn't like this.
After half a century, some memories are fading, but Murray Rabalais, Walter Gorden, and other Louisiana veterans will never forget that they were part of the biggest event of the century, the Allied invasion of Normandy, France. It was the biggest military charge in history, an operation codenamed Overlord. It was the beginning of the end of a nightmare that had overshadowed the world, a nightmare bred from anxiety, frustration, and failure. The years leading up to D-Day were plagued by the poverty of the Great Depression. Louisiana, like the rest of the nation, struggled and looked for solutions. And while Huey Long promised to make every man a king, tides of unrest filled the air. In Europe, the Nazi war machine grew, flexing its muscle in the face of all of Europe. The death and carnage that had wasted a generation just 2 decades before seemed to be inevitable once again. It began with lies and the notion that all men were not created equal. One by one, countries were trampled underfoot. Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Norway, Holland, Belgium, and finally, France. By 1940, only Great Britain and Russia stood between the Third Reich and total control of Europe and possibly the world. Hitler began his assault on Britain, the Blitzkrieg, nighttime bombing designed to break the British will and bring democracy to her knees. Celebrated UNO historian Stephen Ambrose recalls the political climate of those times.
Well, D-Day was the pivot point of the 20th century. The great question of the 20th century was, who's going to prevail, democracy, fascism, or communism? It all came together on D-Day when it looked like it was going to be either communism or fascism that was going to be triumphant in this world. And the democracy, from the record of the 1930s, was a goner. The British and the French and the Americans, the only 3 great democracies, were on their backs. Their unemployment rates were 25, 30, 35%. Their factories were producing at 1/3 of capacity or less. Meanwhile, Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia looked like dynamic states that were really getting their act together and really pushing ahead.
Hitler's assault on Britain was relentless. If Britain fell, Americans were warned that they might be next.
If we are conquered, all will be enslaved, and the United States will be left single-handed to guard the rights of men.
But the memories of World War I lingered. The United States was reluctant to make the battle charge.
I hope the United States will keep out of this war. I believe that it will.
But then, there was Pearl Harbor, the final call to action. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December of 1941, killing thousands of American boys, the United States woke up to the rest of the world's nightmare. In just a few years, America transformed her fighting machine.
The United States Army in 1940 had 160,000 men in it. It ranked 16th in the world, right behind Romania. 4 years later, there was an army of 8 million very well-equipped men. They went across in 6,000 ships of all types, including the Higgins boats, none of which had existed in 1940. They were covered by 11,000 airplanes, none of which had been built in 1940. It was just miraculous what American industry did.
Hitler knew that the attack was coming. He had assigned Field Marshal Erwin Rommel to the job of bolstering the Atlantic Wall's defenses. More than 1 million mines were set, and thousands of obstacles were put in place. The obvious place for the attack was at Calais, only 20 miles across the channel from Dover. The Normandy beaches lay 100 miles from the British ports of Southampton and Portsmouth. It was a span that no invader had successfully crossed in nearly 3 centuries. The original plan called for a 25-mile-wide invasion front. Then, General Montgomery insisted that the front be much broader, at least 50 miles, so that the Allies could land at least 5 divisions instead of 3. But they didn't have enough landing craft. Get them, said Montgomery, and Eisenhower did. He did with a lot of help from a New Orleans man named Andrew Higgins and thousands of Southeast Louisiana workers who mobilized and sometimes traveled nearly 100 miles a day in order to build thousands of landing craft needed to win the war. Edna Plaisance Donnley and her mother went to work outside of the house for the very first time, commuting from St. Rose to New Orleans each and every day.
My mom decided that she and I were going to go to work at Higgins. Women didn't work much at that time. You didn't hear of too many women going out to work, but we did because they didn't have enough men to do all the work, so in the shipyard, and they had to hire women too, so we went and see what we could do.
Peggy Marin, from Reserve, Louisiana, like thousands of other women and men across the country, felt that working for the war effort was her patriotic duty.
And I felt that myself when I went to Higgins, that I was doing my part for the war effort. I really sincerely felt that I was.
Dr. Stephen Ambrose says that Eisenhower once told him that Louisiana's shipbuilding role was crucial.
If Andy Higgins hadn't designed and built those landing craft, we never could have gone in over an open beach. So he's the man who won the war for us.
As America leaped into World War II, Louisiana reacted with vigor, and by 1944, thousands had signed up, and for all kinds of reasons. Like their fathers, their grandfathers, and their great-grandfathers before them who had gone to war, some of them began their journey right here at Jackson Barracks.
We used to always go down to Jackson Barracks and talk about different battles that was fought. We went in, me and John Berlin, was very interested in the military, was very interested in the paratroopers. We wanted something dangerous, something behind lines and all that.
Well, there was nothing going on in New Orleans, and there was a war, and I just wanted to see what it was all about.
Pearl Harbor just infuriated the whole population of the United States, and we were all as one, and with the idea of vanquishing our enemies as fast as we could, and everybody wanted to do something, and there was a wild rush to volunteer and to enlist.
I was reluctant to do it to begin with, but after knowing the reason we were doing it and seeing what was happening in Germany and other nations, that I was real glad to be there.
On the evening of June 5th, more than 13,000 paratroopers shaved their heads, blackened their faces, sharpened their knives, and then prepared to jump into France at night and initiate Operation Overlord. The first planes to take off carried soldiers who had never seen battle. They were the 101st Airborne Division, known as the Screaming Eagles.
They told us this was it. They gave us a talk. Eisenhower came around and talked to us and all that. The eyes of the world are on you, and give us a big pep talk and all. When we was going to the plane, I seen G Company passing. That's where my friend was in G Company. So I waved down. Happy good luck, John. He said, good luck, Lou. Okay, then we went to the plane.
So you just sit there and you just kind of contemplate this momentous event that you're a party to.
After flying over the channel a bit, it got pretty rough. The plane would waver and the sky all lit up. Ooh, I was scared.
You have an apparatus in the plane. It's a light fixture that has a green light and a red light. And as long as the red light is on, everybody stands pat. When you get over to close to your drop zone, everybody stands up, hooks up your snap fastener on this anchor line, and then you're standing in the door.
And you go out fast. If I got to the door, I seen that, I said, boy, ain't that pretty. Man, all colors, 4th of July, flashes all over the place and everything else. Man, I said, that's nice. And then you're out. Drop, the chute opened. I looked up at my chute, and then that's when I realized those suckers are shooting bullets at me.
First thing you do is when you get in the door, you say, what in the hell am I doing up here? I don't belong here. But that's just a flash. And then the next thing you know, you're out and prop blast, and you committed.
We saw the green light, and jump master said go, and brother, we went. But they must have jumped us about 300 feet. I think you can fall about 80 feet before your chute opens, and then you make an oscillation. And on that first one, I hit the ground. I was knocked totally unconscious. And I woke up, I didn't know where the heck I was.
And as we was landing in the fields there, right after we landed, you can see the planes coming over. Oh, I mean hundreds and hundreds of them, with paratroopers all jumping out and everywhere. But you seen some of them being shot down. You can see the plane coming, you can see that it's only 400 feet, you can see them good. They're against the moon. And one of those planes was the one that my friend was on, John Berlin. They never did find anything of him. He was going, man. He was going with the wind.
I woke up, I didn't know where the heck I was. Didn't nobody around me, nobody. And then I couldn't walk. I had broken my ankle.
It was hard to realize say, man, what these suckers shooting at me for? I didn't do them anything.
I saw a little place looked like a forest. I later found out it was a hedgerow.
The hedgerows were big stone walls that over the, I guess, centuries that they took the stones off the fields and made, that's how they fenced into their fields with these stones, and they made hedgerows. And Germans behind every one of them, you had to take every hedgerow, one after another.
They were worthy opponents, I'll tell you that. And they were good fighters. They're professional fighters.
They gave us these crickets. Like you're getting popcorn, click, click, like a cricket. It makes a noise. You squeeze with your thumb. They gave us that. And you had, I think you clicked twice, and if you're a friendly force, you click maybe 4 times. I forgot what the numbers was. Bad thing about that, though, the Germans heard it too. So we threw those crickets away.
You would stand off at a distance. You were here, they were there. They moved to the right, you moved to the left. You flanked them here, they flanked you there. You withdrew, you advanced, they advanced.
Shooting, they're shooting, everybody's shooting, like a bunch of cowboys and Indians. Shooting anything that moves, man. And as it got light and dawn start coming, getting light, you can see where some paratroopers landed in trees, hanging from trees and all. The chutes are caught on the trees and all. And where it was all just hanging there dead, the Germans just shot them all. And it wasn't until the next morning that actually we met the soldiers coming up from the beach, the infantry and all that, and they had some tanks and all that. And then they fought with us.
Louis Frey, Walter Gorden, and Maury Rabalais fought on through the rest of the war. Rabalais was captured by the Germans during the Battle of the Bulge and became a POW at Stalag 13. Gorden was wounded but lived. Frey survived every battle of the war without so much as a scratch. D-Day was the first encounter with Germans for many troops, but our flyers already had flown many, many hazardous missions, and fighter pilot Bob O'Neill was certainly no exception. O'Neill had spent the month before D-Day bombing and strafing marshalling yards near Rouen in his P-47, which, by the way, was named Mama Lou.
At the time that I got overseas there, my wife, Betty, was pregnant. So I named the plane Mama Lou. Her name is Betty Lou, So I named it Mama Lou. The reason we hit it was that all the yard was filled with ammunition trains and supplies and stuff like that. The tally for that day, the intelligence report showed we destroyed over 28 locomotives alone, in addition to just numerous boxcars and all, because you hit one, if it's loaded with ammunition, it just goes right down the line.
June 6, 1944 was Bob O'Neill's 22nd birthday, and at that age he was already flight commander of the 406th Fighter Group. It was a day that he and his men were especially ready.
Well, we knew that the D-Day, the invasion was coming off, and we surmised where it would come off because we had been busy about a week previous dive bombing, softening up the area where the invasion would occur. And then about a week before the actual invasion, they made a false raid on Dieppe to confuse the Germans and make the Germans think they were going to land at Dieppe or Calais. It wasn't until the night before, on June the 5th, on the evening, they assembled us all in the tent and they broke the news to us, tomorrow is D-Day. And of course, all of us are elated, you know, the whole German Air Force is going to show up. The group took off, and our squadron was assigned at 5,000 feet over the beachhead. And as we crossed the channel, it was sort of broken clouds and all, but you could see ships all over the whole channel. It looks like there were ships from England completely over to France. So we spent that day and the next day more or less patrolling this air cover, and since the German Air Force didn't show up, then we went back to our routine of strafing and skip bombing and everything else of all the reinforcements that were coming up to the coast. We were flying 3 and 4 missions a day. So they finally told us, look, fellas, you're over here to the end of the war. So you sit down and you figure out there ain't no way with this kind of stuff going on that you're going to last to the end of the war. So you say to yourself, you're going to go out there and take out as many as you can before they get you. And I think that's what saved a lot of pilots, because the more aggressiveness you show in combat, the more your chances are of surviving. You'll find, if you read a history of all wars, the guy that runs or is scared is the one that gets killed.
The American assault from the Channel was set for 6:30 a.m. In the first misty light, the sea suddenly appeared full of ships, some 5,000 of them. At each hour, the landing craft, carrying the men of the 29th Division and the 1st Infantry, broke their rendezvous circles and headed for the Normandy beaches. Omaha was the crucial beach, the link between Utah Beach on the west and the British beaches to the east. Omaha was physically difficult to cross because the troops were now faced with 100-foot-high bluffs. American troops faced an uphill journey to try and take the German strong points. That was bad enough, but there was another reason why the offensive at Omaha was especially difficult. The planners of the assault had assumed that the enemy defenses would be manned by second-rate German troops. The Allies knew that Rommel was saving his best field divisions in reserve, ready to move them where they were needed the most. But shortly before the invasion fleet sailed, one of Rommel's divisions was moved to Omaha to practice invasion defensive maneuvers. So, this well-trained division was right on the bluffs, exactly where the Germans needed them. Suddenly, the German maneuvers became the real thing. Lucien Laborde from Hamburg, Louisiana, was with the inexperienced but well-trained 29th Division. Tom McCann from Monroe was with the battle-proven 1st Infantry, known as the Big Red One. They were to hit the eastern part of the beach. Bruce and Jean Audemars, Cajun brothers from Houma, were Sea Bees attached to the first wave. They both piloted rhino barges that were to ferry in troops and equipment. Navigating through shallow waters was a job they had been familiar with most of their lives in the Louisiana swamps.
Most of the Cajuns from around Houma in that area, used to drive in Morgan City, and they steered shrimp boat, oyster boats, tugs. They knew how to handle and operate small equipment up to 85 feet. And heck, they could get where other people couldn't.
But what Bruce and Jean could never be prepared for was what they encountered at daybreak that morning. The things they saw and did would stay with them the rest of their lives.
On D-Day, June 6th, we went in the first wave. As it goes, we had a little rough. It was a little rough because we had to move the bodies so we could lower our ramps to unload the personnel. And they were floating from right to left as the waves in the current would go. They would move with the current.
This German in the pillbox and found out just pressed one button and wiped out the whole anything in the valley there. And there must have been between 50 and 75 minutes one time, just burned to death.
There were two boys from Homer that passed on, and we knew them when they were on their soldiers. And they went and told us hello and found out where we were from. And they went on through this little valley. Just from each side, the flamethrowers hit them as they was walking in the valley. And it killed both of them. And it made say, that really got you.
Many of the first wave approached the beach with no problem. Nothing, no artillery, no mortar fire, nothing. And they thought that this was going to be a cinch. But the Germans held their fire until the ramps were down on the landing craft. And as soon as our ramps went down and the troops began to file off, all hell broke loose, and machine guns from every direction trained on these boats as the men were coming off, and they slaughtered them.
Laborde's boat, like so many others, ran into an underwater obstacle and sank.
My boat struck an underwater obstacle about 50 or 60 yards from the beach and began to circle. The Navy man on the boat told us to get off. We worked our way into the beach by letting the wave action carry us as we danced on our toes. We had these packs on our back and holding our carbines over our head to keep them from getting wet. And gradually we worked our way into where we could walk in the rest of the way.
When Laborde finally did make land, he found even more chaos.
When we hit the beach, we scattered out until we were able to appraise the situation, and it wasn't good. Most of the men dug a hole into the sand with their bare hands to get some protection until something happened, and we didn't know what was going to happen.
Many of the Germans had rushed to their battle stations in the network of interconnecting trenches along the tops of the bluffs, and enemy fire continued to be as heavy as it was at H hour. Artillery and mortar shells pounded the Allied boats as they came in. Machine gun fire swept the vast beaches, and sharpshooters picked off individual soldiers, especially those who were stopped at the water's edge. Nothing seemed to be going according to plan.
Men were lined up against the seawall, the gravel seawall, in all stages of from dead to wounded to not wounded. That's when the commanders made every possible effort to get people to get killed crossing the beach or accomplishing something rather than getting killed doing nothing.
By the time Tom McCann reached the beachhead, he found himself in the midst of what appeared to be total chaos.
It was a grand junkyard. All these boats, there were boats that were couldn't move inland. I mean, they got stuck because of the tide going out and things like that. They were shelled and they were hit, and some of them would turn over, and it was just awful. We didn't know what was going on in the beaches. All we knew that we was to go in, get there, and go forward, and go as far as we could.
But most of the roads off the beach, and a key to the Omaha attack, were still controlled by the enemy.
I said this, that if I could survive the beaches, I believed I would live through the war.
Despite the bloodshed on the beaches, many feel that the most difficult assignment of the invasion was given to Lieutenant Colonel James Rudder. His assignment, capture Point du Hoc. That was a 100-foot high cliff upon which sat 6 large 155-millimeter guns, guns that were aimed at Omaha and Utah beaches. This assignment required a very special breed of soldiers, the Rangers. Harvey Koenig of New Iberia was one of Rudder's men.
I was a Ranger. I joined the Rangers when they first organized in the United States. The reason I did that because I wanted to get this damn war over with.
The mission at Point du Hoc required these well-trained soldiers to knock out crucial enemy defenses.
It had to be invaded because you had 6 big weapons, 155 rifles. They could use those weapons on Omaha, Utah, or the ships at sea, mainly the beaches. When they found them, they was headed for the Utah Beach. If they could have fired them at Utah Beach, then Utah Beach would not have been made. They said we couldn't do it.
However, the word can't was not in the Ranger vocabulary. In the early morning hours of June 6th, the Rangers boarded ship and sailed into rough seas.
The seas was rough. We bailed water all the way in with our helmets. We lost some ships, we lost some men. We lost one man who was the best swimmer in our company. We lost him at sea.
Once they reached land, the Rangers had one focus, and that was to scale the cliffs.
Yes, they got some of our men. They cut some of our ropes, some of our people fell. But once we got the man up there with a BAR, a Browning automatic rifle, once they got him up there, then he, in turn, settled the Germans down, and men could climb on up there, one right after another.
Sergeant Koenig, using only a grappling hook and ropes, climbed to the top of Point du Hoc. While his comrades eliminated the big guns, he destroyed the German communication center.
When I got up there, the lines I cut was communication line from Utah to Omaha, Utah Beach to Omaha Beach. They don't have communication from one to the other, they're out of luck.
By the time the cliff was taken, only 90 of the 225 men were still able to carry arms. But to the Rangers, it was the mission that mattered.
The whole mission was a complete mission. It couldn't be no more complete. In fact, I think the 2nd Ranger Battalion completed their mission before any other military organization did. We lost some men, yes. We always lose men. We've lost men every place we go. If you don't lose men, it's a shoe-in. What are we there for? We didn't get medals where other people would get them. We were trained to do that. They had to have guts. They had to have, I'm going to say, nerve, willpower, their guts, willing to get after it, ready to do it, ready to give them the heart and soul for it.
After taking Point du Hoc, the Rangers then pressed on to liberate the town of Grand Camp. It was behind the cliffs. The Rangers gave everything for the freedom of these French people, and their sacrifice has forged a bond between them and the citizens of Grand Camp.
I know this, when you go to Grand Camp, that city there loves the Rangers, because the Rangers went down there and freed their people.
After half a century, he says they haven't forgotten.
They haven't, they never will. I haven't, never will. No.
The 50th anniversary of D-Day was an international event, and once again the eyes of the world were focused on the Normandy beaches. World leaders flew over the famous beaches, codenamed Omaha and Utah, and gathered for ceremonies to honor the living and mourn the dead.
Now we come to this hallowed place that speaks more than anything else in silence. Here on this quiet plateau, on this small piece of American soil, we honor those who gave their lives for us 50 crowded years ago. And so let us now ask them, all the veterans of the Normandy campaign, to stand if they can and be recognized.
The days surrounding the 50th anniversary were days of reckoning for everyone. Americans stared at the cliffs, in total awe of the men who scaled those granite walls as the Germans fired straight down on them. Veterans, who were now in the twilight of their lives, made their way to the beaches for perhaps a last look at the hallowed ground and the waters that for a few hours ran red with human blood. Others, wanting something to take home that would remind them of this day, grabbed up fistful of sand as a keepsake. Marvin Perrett was one of them, grasping for pieces of his past on Utah Beach, perhaps remembering all that he did as the operator of a landing craft on that longest day.
I very distinctly remember on my very first trip into the beach, I am in this assignment of watercraft, and I'm looking ahead, and I see the machine gun bullets spraying the water in my path, cascading the water 10, 12 feet up in the air. And as I'm driving ashore, I'm looking right down death's call. And your first reaction is, let's get the heck out of here. Either go right or left or whatever, just turn back. But there's no way you can do that. You must go on. So consequently, and I don't know how I did it, I don't think I could do it today, but as a young man, 18, and with an assignment and a duty to perform, I would tell you that all of us came ashore in the hail of gunfire. Now, this was gunfire I could see, and making no mistake about it. I am unable to tell you at this moment how much of it went by. I could hear, whiz, but you just say, well, missed that one, or they missed me. A poor shot, probably, But as I say, I had just turned 18 on this time that I was coming ashore, and for the most part, I was just a young man, or one might say a kid. But I felt that overnight, certainly, I became a man.
Today, as Marvin Perrett walked the beach of Utah, he thought not only of the price that he had paid, but the price that the world had paid that day 50 years ago.
And I would imagine many persons here today are here to reflect on the price of war. I would hope that many lessons will have been learned from this moment in time for all nations. Amen.
Some veterans chose to relive their D-Day experience in a literal way. Many paratroopers jumped once again into the fields where they had dropped 50 years earlier.
Oh, he's coming over this way now.
Yeah,
Got these
yeah.
big
Climbing
yappos.
them old risers up there,
Old
trying
guys
to get
used to
out
be
there
up there
and shoot in.
forever, for God's sake.
Yeah,
Unless you're somebody who's shooting at you, you know? Oh, Christ.
But they jumped much higher than we jumped. We jumped at 600 feet.
Gee.
They look like they're more than 1,000 feet up there. But look at it. See them how they're coming out
look
together?
At that
That's
last
beautiful.
plane.
It's beautiful. Beautiful.
It is gorgeous.
New Orleanian Ed Whalen was back in Normandy for the first time in 50 years, and being there helped him bring back vivid memories of the day that he jumped as a member of the 82nd Airborne.
Of jumping quick like that. Yeah, they one on top there, and there's no space. Just like this.
Really?
Yeah, they
That's why-
push each other out the door.
Yeah, but don't push me.
Modern-day airborne troops reenacted the D-Day drop in order to salute those who had done it 50 years ago.
We went all around the peninsula and came in from the other side and came back across. And the ride was good. It wasn't as windy, as I remember, it wasn't as windy as it is here. The only thing when we hit the anti-aircraft, the guy just panicked. And not only with us, I read in an article in the paper, quite a few planes did that, because the pilots had never been in combat. When they saw that anti-aircraft coming up, it's just, you know, it blew the top, that's what I'd say. It's just natural. You either have it or you don't have it.
In St. Marigles and in other small towns surrounding the beaches, there was continuous celebration. Church bells rang, mass was held, and prayers were said. Mary P. Hart from Bunkie, Louisiana, was there in behalf of her deceased husband, who jumped on D-Day with the 82nd Airborne.
I think it is just wonderful. I'm happy to be able to help honor these men who gave us our freedom.
These uncommon men were treated as celebrities by the French, who thanked the old soldiers for liberating their towns.
Dans leur cœur et dans leur chair, combien de mères, combien d'épouses, combien d'enfants, marqués pour toujours par l'être cher qu'ils ne reverront jamais. Nous n'avons pas le droit d'oublier. Leur exemple et leur sacrifice doivent rester à jamais gravés dans nos mémoires.
How many were hurt in their heart and flesh forever? How many mothers, wives, and children upset forever because of the dear one they would never see again? We have no right to forget. Their bravery and sacrifice have to be marked forever in our memories.
New Orleans fighter pilot Bob O'Neill's mission on D-Day was to fly up and down the beach of Normandy and protect the Allied invading forces from the Luftwaffe. Only 2 German planes, however, showed up that day, and they made only one pass. In the days and weeks that followed, O'Neill's job was to engage the enemy's ground forces, which was attempting to halt the Allied march. It was on one of these missions that O'Neill finally encountered what was left of the German Air Force in France. Unfortunately, a German pilot was the better man that day, and O'Neill's P-47 Thunderbolt was shot out from beneath him. His burning aircraft tragically came down in the village of Vianney, killing a small boy and injuring a number of people.
Alors l'avion est tombé ici, là.
That's where your airplane
il y avait une vieille grange.
landed. There was an old shed.
A shed here.
Yeah.
Et là,
And this was the butcher shop.
And that was the butcher shop.
Well, it came through this way.
Voilà.
Yes, because it turned when it hit the trees. It probably made it turn.
It must have trimmed them off like that.
Yeah, yeah.
German defenders, who followed his chute from a distance, discovered that they were too late when they arrived at his landing site. Angered and determined to find the American pilot, the Nazi commander threatened to kill one villager each day until the French handed over the downed American pilot.
And what happened with the parachute? Somebody probably took it away. But one thing is that when the German came, there was nothing left. And everything disappeared, like, as we say in French, like a mail in the mailbox. And when they came, and he just had the tip of his nose coming out of the hay, nothing else. That was the only thing. The German passed by and they didn't see a thing. And we were frightened.
What would have happened?
Qu'est-ce qui se serait passé si les Allemands vous avaient trouvés?
Ben, ils ont porté l'arme à gauche, hein?
They would have killed us, which means in French you said they would have put our weapon on the wrong side. They would have killed us.
And why did they hide them?
Et pourquoi est-ce que vous l'avez caché, ce monsieur, alors, puisque c'était si dangereux?
Il faut faire ce qu'il faut, hein?
Well, you've got to do what should be done.
C'est la guerre ou quoi?
It was war,
faut sauver ce qu'il faut.
You've got to save what has to be saved.
Despite the threat, no villagers were shot, and weeks later O'Neill's life was finally secure when American forces overran the village of Vianney. O'Neill did not have much of a chance to say thank you in the excitement of the liberation. But now, 50 years later, he has returned to say just that. One of the men most responsible for saving Bob O'Neill's life is now the mayor of Vianney. He and the townspeople have planned a full day of activities just for Bob O'Neill. And the first stop was a French grammar school.
It's your plane and another one there.
That's wonderful.
Here O'Neill is introduced.
Lorsqu'ils descendaient en parachute, les Allemands leur tiraient dessus. Alors il est venu pour libérer la France. Et il a tenu, pour sa première visite depuis 50 ans, à venir vous voir.
And the children ask questions.
Étiez-vous obligé de venir en France ou étiez-vous volontaire?
Were you forced to come to France or did you volunteer?
Was I forced to come to France?
As a pilot?
I assure you not. We all wanted to come.
On voulait tous venir. On n'a jamais été forcés. Ça, c'est certain. C'était tous une volonté.
You might explain to them that back when America was under the heel of the British,
il y a très longtemps, quand les États-Unis étaient sous le joug des Britanniques,
the French government came to the help.
Les Français sont venus aider les Américains au moment de Lafayette, par exemple. Par exemple, si vous avez entendu parler de Lafayette, Lafayette est allé aider les Américains, eux, à se libérer.
To help us gain our freedom.
De façon à... Donc, so that's...
But it was our purpose
Notre
was you
but,
had a man that was threatening the whole world.
C'est que nous, on avait l'impression qu'il y avait un homme qui était en train de menacer le monde entier.
And of course, we came to protect our children as well as
Et bien sûr, quand on est venu.
Next, O'Neill returned to the room near the chateau where he was hidden, and it is here that he acknowledges his debt to Eves Kerrigan.
I had no fear of being killed. You know, once I got in their hands and was up here, I felt that, I was safe. Everybody was so friendly, and if they were all ready to risk their life to secret me and hide me here. What do you say to people to save your life? That risk their own life, to save me. He's like a brother to me. Oh, more than a brother, a savior to me.
Later in the evening, the townspeople gather to celebrate the special bond that has developed between them and the American fighter pilot. At dinner, Eves Kerrigan presents Bob O'Neill with an honorary citizenship and a silver medal. A less conventional gift follows that.
At first, a piece of your own plane. My brother Philip and me took it on the church place after the crash, the 19th August 1944. We are very happy to give it.
All the way over, from America to here, I dreamed of finding a piece of my plane. Thank you very much. Thank you.
O'Neill, in turn, has gifts for Kerrigan.
I will now officially make him a member of the squadron.
Et maintenant, c'est seulement maintenant, avec l'uniforme, qu'il est un membre officiel de l'escadrille.
Today, the door was finally closed on an unfulfilled mission that has rested in the corner of Bob O'Neill's mind all of these many years. Now he had returned to say thank you for saving his life, only to find warm and grateful people thanking him for what he had done. Once again, Bob O'Neill would leave the village of Vianney to embark on the rest of his life.
Just look how many young fellows were out here, and look at them. You see, they didn't live very long, and that's a shame. And it's just the, you might say, the youth of the country that's laid out here.
Just being near the beaches was a poignant and emotional experience for the veterans who fought here 50 years ago.
You see, look at the flags here, and you see some flowers, some you don't.
The feelings were almost overwhelming for Tom McCann as he searched the cemeteries for graves of friends that he once fought beside.
It's, as I say, you know, I'm looking for people with the 1st Division. And you know, very few of them now that I've seen here with the 1st Division. There's, you see the Airborne. There's the 4th Division that landed on Utah Beach. Now there's one from the 1st Division right there. No, that's the 4th Division. The 9th Division. But it's real nice to see these flags here, the American flags and the French flags. (101st Airborne), the 9th Division. But it's really something seeing all of these crosses. Just amazing.
Tom McCann of Monroe was a member of the famous 1st Infantry's Big Red One, who stormed Omaha Beach. He was the recipient of a Bronze Star. But in Tom's own mind, he is not a hero.
It's just awful that these young men had to die. It's just awful. Especially the youth, you see. When they get old as I am and we die, that's all right. But I mean, we've had a good life. I've had a wonderful life. I wouldn't change it. But I mean, here, these people didn't enjoy the things that I've enjoyed. One thing people in our country don't realize, you know, what people have gone through to give them what they've got. And this is it right here.
The town of St. Lo was literally leveled by American artillery of the 29th Division 50 years ago. Yet members of the 29th were given a hero's welcome. The local people insisted that children of the town march alongside these aged American veterans so as not to forget the lesson that is being retold here 50 years later.
It's overwhelming. The applause, you just can't beat it. It's just, you don't know what to say to them. You really want to thank them, and you can't thank them enough. They're really great. No, I don't feel like a hero. I feel grateful for all of this. I really do. It's wonderful.
This is the most beautiful demonstration of French-American relationship that I've ever seen. And these kids represent the future. They are the people that keep this country free.
The most vivid lesson came from Lucien Laborde of Hamburg, Louisiana, to his children and grandchildren.
There's a little path coming up. There's a break in the hill. I landed in that vicinity. And gradually
Today, he has brought 18 of them to the exact spot where he was pinned down on Omaha Beach in the bloodiest incursion of the entire operation on the morning of June 6, 1944.
I'm thinking of how many didn't get up here. There were so many stacked out on the beach that it just was unbelievable. It was very distressing even to make it to the top. You were very happy to get up here, but you knew how many you had left behind that would never make it.
Laborde, choking back his emotions, relived for his family that terrible day when he inched his way on his stomach up the beach under a deadly crossfire from enemy machine gunners. Machine gunners who were positioned where his family is now standing.
You didn't run. You crawled across the sandy part because until you felt that you could begin to put a little headquarters group together. Then we had to stand or sit or kneel together to make plans to take new objectives, because the objectives that we were assigned were 2 miles out of our area. So we had to make another attempt to get to Saint Laurent, which is what we wanted to do. And there was no getting up and running. That was sure death, because the whole beach was laced with machine gun fire from all directions.
Perhaps the most important aspect of this emotional return for Lucien Laborde was seeing his own children right before his eyes, passing on the story of D-Day, and especially the agony of Omaha Beach.
The tide was out at the time, so there was more beach to run up. And they had all those spikes.
Family members had heard some of these stories before, but here and now, overlooking the very spot of Lucien Laborde's most trying moment in life, they came to fully understand what he had gone through.
I want them to think back of this beach and the courage that these young men up here showed when they crossed that beach, to be able to make this world safe for them. And when the time comes that the same situation comes up, you have to be prepared to give your life for freedom.
Lucien Laborde's story of courage, valor, and individual leadership rang with a certain moral clarity and a sense of common purpose that has all but been lost today.
That's my message. That's it. That's why they're here. When they find that going is tough and they're not getting all the breaks at home, just think back to this.
In the months following D-Day, more than 1 million men went into France and pushed forward to finally defeat Hitler. Their path was laid by a few men whose spirit was unstoppable.
That first wave was really just awful, but they kept coming. Now, they kept coming not because they were out to impose an ideology on anybody else. They kept coming not because they wanted to conquer territory. They kept coming because they wanted the world to live in freedom. When can their glory fade? Tennyson asked about the men of the Light Brigade. And so ask I about the men of D-Day. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made.